How the American Civil War finally ended, 1861–1865. Part 1. The nation divides. In 1861, the United States was tearing apart. For decades, the North and South had quarreled over slavery, economy, and state rights. The South's plantation system thrived on enslaved labor, while the industrial North called slavery a moral evil. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president, Southern leaders feared he would abolish slavery. One by one, 11 Southern states seceded from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America, with Jefferson Davis as president. On April 12, 1861, Confederate cannons opened fire on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. The American Civil War had begun. Part 2. The war begins. The early months were filled with chaos and enthusiasm. Both sides believed the war would end quickly. But at Bull Run, Manassas, the first major battle, the Union Army was crushed. Suddenly, Americans realized this would be a long and bloody struggle. The Confederacy fought for independence, the Union fought for unity. Families were divided, friends turned into enemies, and the United States became a battleground of ideology and destiny. Part 3. Lincoln's struggle for command. President Lincoln faced one of the greatest challenges in history, leading a divided nation through war. Early Union generals hesitated, fearing to act decisively. But Lincoln refused to give up. He studied maps, replaced commanders, and began to see that only total commitment could preserve the Union. At the same time, the Confederacy found its hero, General Robert E. Lee, a master of defense and maneuver, who would lead the South's armies to brilliant victories. Part 4. The Confederacy's early triumphs. The years 1861 and 1862 saw a wave of Confederate victories, at Bull Run, 7 Days, and Fredericksburg. Lee's army outmaneuvered larger Union forces, giving the South new hope. But in the Western theater, things were different. A rising Union general named Ulysses S. Grant captured Fort Donelson and Shiloh, proving relentless and bold. The war was spreading across a continent, and its cost was growing with every battle. Part 5. A nation at war. By 1862, the Civil War had become total war. Hundreds of thousands of men marched, fought, and died. Cities like Richmond, Washington, and New Orleans became strongholds of strategy. Women nursed the wounded, factories produced weapons, and railroads moved armies faster than ever before. The United States, North and South, was now a nation consumed by war. Part 6. Antietam and the bloodiest day. In September 1862, Lee invaded the North for the first time. His army met Union forces at Antietam Creek, Maryland. The battle that followed was the bloodiest single day in American history. Over 22,000 men were killed, wounded, or missing. Though tactically inconclusive, Antietam forced Lee to retreat, and gave Lincoln the chance he needed to act. Part 7. The Emancipation Proclamation. After Antietam, Lincoln took a bold step. On January 1, 1863, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring all enslaved people in Confederate territory free. The war was no longer just about preserving the Union, it was now a fight for freedom and human dignity. It changed everything. Enslaved people fled to Union lines, and nearly 200,000 black soldiers would join the Union Army, fighting bravely for their own liberation. Part 8. Gettysburg, the Great Battle. In July 1863, Lee launched his greatest gamble, an invasion of the North. The result was Gettysburg, a 3-day battle that would decide the war's future. From July 1 to July 3, hills and fields were soaked in blood. On the third day, Lee ordered Pickett's charge, sending 12,000 men across open ground under heavy fire. The assault failed. The Confederacy's finest army was shattered. Gettysburg became the turning point, the beginning of the South's downfall. Part 9. The fall of Vicksburg. While Gettysburg raged in the east, another victory came in the west. Grant's army laid siege to Vicksburg, Mississippi, the last Confederate stronghold on the Mississippi River. After months of bombardment, the starving city surrendered on July 4, 1863. The Union now controlled the entire Mississippi, cutting the Confederacy in two. Lincoln rejoiced. The father of waters again goes unvexed to the sea. Part 10. The War of Attrition. By 1864, the war entered its final, brutal phase. Lincoln promoted Ulysses S. Grant to commander of all Union forces. Grant's strategy was relentless: attack everywhere, give Lee no rest. Battles at the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, and Cold Harbor left tens of thousands dead. Grant was criticized as a butcher, but he understood the truth: the South could not replace its losses. The Union could. Part 11: Sherman's campaign begins. Meanwhile, in the South, General William Tecumseh Sherman advanced toward Atlanta, Georgia. His goal was to destroy the South's heart, its railroads, factories, and spirit. Through fierce battles at Kennesaw Mountain and Peachtree Creek, Sherman pushed ever closer. In September 1864, Atlanta fell. The news electrified the North and secured Lincoln's re-election. The South's fate was now sealed. Part 12: The March to the Sea. After capturing Atlanta, Sherman began one of history's most famous campaigns. He ordered his army to march from Atlanta to Savannah, living off the land and destroying everything that could support the enemy. Railroads were ripped up, barns burned, and plantations destroyed. The "March to the Sea" was a message: the South could fight no more. In December, Sherman sent a telegram to Lincoln. Greater than, "I beg to present you the city of Savannah as a Christmas gift." Part 13: The Confederacy crumbles. By early 1865, the Confederate Army was starving. Its railroads were gone, its cities in ruins, and its men exhausted. Yet Lee refused to surrender, hoping for a miracle. But when Union forces broke through at Petersburg, the last defenses of Richmond fell. Jefferson Davis fled, and the Confederate government dissolved. The dream of independence had turned to ashes. Part 14: The Road to Appomattox. Lee's army retreated westward, pursued by Grant's massive force. Men collapsed from hunger and exhaustion. At Appomattox Court House, Lee finally realized the truth: there was no escape. He sent word to Grant: it was time to end the war. On April 9, 1865, the two generals met to decide the fate of a nation. Part 15: The Surrender at Appomattox. Inside the home of Wilmer McLean, the men sat down in silence. Grant wore a mud-stained uniform, Lee, dressed in full honor. Grant's terms were generous: Confederate soldiers could return home with their horses and personal belongings. There would be no revenge, only peace. Lee signed the surrender documents. Outside, Union soldiers saluted their defeated foes. The guns that had thundered for 4 long years finally fell silent. Part 16: The Assassination of Lincoln. But peace brought tragedy. On April 14, 1865, just 5 days after the surrender, President Abraham Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater. During the performance, actor John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer, entered the presidential box and shot Lincoln in the back of the head. Lincoln died the next morning, a martyr to the cause of freedom. The nation that he had saved mourned in grief and disbelief. Part 17: The Final Surrenders. Even after Appomattox, smaller Confederate armies still held out. But one by one, they surrendered. Joseph E. Johnston to Sherman in North Carolina, Kirby Smith in Texas, and others soon after. By June 1865, the Confederacy had ceased to exist. The American Civil War was truly over. Part 18: The Cost of Victory. The war had cost the lives of over 620,000 Americans, more than any other conflict in U.S. history. Towns were emptied, families destroyed, and fields turned into graves. But from this destruction came a new birth: the end of slavery and the preservation of the Union. America had paid a terrible price for its freedom. Part 19: Reconstruction and Freedom. With the war's end came the challenge of rebuilding. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, the 14th and 15th guaranteed rights and votes to Black Americans. But Reconstruction was harsh and uncertain. The South was in ruins, and racial hatred persisted. Still, the ideals that Lincoln and millions of soldiers had died for, liberty and equality, had triumphed in principle, if not yet in full practice. Part 20: The Legacy of the Civil War. Closing narration. The Civil War ended in 1865, but its legacy endures. It forged the modern United States, a stronger, more unified, more democratic nation. It proved that freedom is not easily won, and that a nation's soul must sometimes be tested in fire. From the ashes of war rose a republic committed to liberty and equality. The Civil War's end was not the end of America's story, it was the beginning of its rebirth. Clapperboard fade out. Music swells. The American flag waves over a silent battlefield. The end.